Madam President.
The senator from Alaska.
Madam President, I call my amendment number 5518 and ask that it be reported by number.
The clerk will report the amendment.
The senator from Alaska, Mr. Sullivan, for himself and Mr. Lee, proposes an amendment numbered 5518 to the resolution of ratification to Treaty Doc 117-1.
Madam President, about 4 years ago, I was part of a meeting with several senators, or about 11 of us, here in the U.S. Capitol with the Chinese ambassador. And in the meeting, I had raised a number of issues about the lack of reciprocity that China has with regard to the United States. Market access on our trade, their ability to invest here, but we couldn't invest there. The fact that they have all kinds of journalists in America, we can't have journalists over there. Just across the board on so many things, Confucius Institutes in American universities, no equivalent in Chinese universities. No reciprocity on so many topics. And I'll never forget the response of the Chinese ambassador to the United States. 11 U.S. senators right there. He said, well, Senator, I agree there's a lack of reciprocity in a number of areas, but that's because China is a developing country. China is a developing country. That's what he said just 4 years ago. And my response was, Mr. Ambassador, with all due respect, can you please stop using that talking point about your country being a developing country? It's kind of an insult to all of our intelligence. And to be honest, you're not a developing country. The American people know it, the world knows it, and you need to stop telling everybody and using that as a crutch. Madam President, what does that have to do with the amendment that I just called up? Well, today, before we vote on the Kigali Treaty, I have an amendment that I'm asking all of my colleagues here in the Senate to support. I'm not talking about the merits of the Kigali Treaty itself. There's an element of this treaty that raises a principle that is at stake right now that is so important with regard to China, the United States, and the rest of the world. This treaty that we're getting ready to vote on continues to classify China as a, quote, developing country. Why does that matter? Well, as I mentioned, it's a facade. China is not a developing country. It is the second largest economy in the world. It is one of the most industrialized countries in the world. It has one of the biggest militaries in the world. The World Bank even now considers China an upper middle income country. But what China keeps trying to do in international organizations and in international treaties is continue to get the same benefits as truly developing countries such as Ghana, Somalia, Nigeria, Bangladesh. These are the countries that need global assistance, not China. So my amendment today is very simple to this treaty. It first says that the United States Senate concludes, quote, the People's Republic of China is not a developing country, and the United Nations and other intergovernmental organizations should not treat the People's Republic of China as such, unquote. And then my amendment, Madam President, goes one step further, and it makes the advice and consent of the Senate for this treaty contingent upon the Secretary of State of the United States going to the UN in the Vienna Convention Secretariat to file an amendment to the treaty that clarifies that China should be taken off the annex that defines it as a developing country. So, we have a declaration, China's not a developing country, and then it says to the Secretary of State, before you get the advice and consent of the United States Senate, you shall go to the UN and file an instrument that says China should be removed from the list of countries to this treaty that are called developing countries. And again, Madam President, this matters. This matters, for example, on this treaty. Why? Because in this treaty, the developing country annex gives those countries under that annex much longer time to implement the treaty, and it actually gives them funding from the UN to implement the treaty. Now, where does that funding come from? Most of it comes from the United States. So in essence, right now, the way the treaty is organized, the United States gives the UN money to help implement the treaty, and a lot of that money is going to go to China. Does anyone in the U.S. Senate think that makes sense? Does anyone in America think that that makes sense? It does not. Furthermore, on this treaty and on so many other international agreements, whether at the UN or other places, when you give China more time for implementation, particularly as it relates to the global environment, all you're doing is harming the global environment. China's a developed country. China's an industrialized country. The U.S. Senate, the international organizations where China's a member, needs to start recognizing this. So I'm proud to say I work closely with Senators Barrasso and Senators Lee on this amendment. I actually wish it were stronger. Senator Barrasso was here on the floor talking about his amendment. I actually think that is the preferred way to go, but we couldn't get agreement in terms of the Barrasso amendment. So I'm encouraging all of my colleagues to vote on this principle. The U.S. Senate, on any international agreement or any international treaty, should no longer agree to the obvious. China is not a developing country. It's an industrialized country, and we should make clear in the Senate and in international organizations that that's the view of the United States, and we need to encourage the Secretary of State, which is exactly what my amendment does, to make sure the UN and other countries agree with us on that. I encourage all of my colleagues to